And now Rishi Sunak, the UK Prime Minister, also walking in to the venue, the Bharat Mandapam. Of course, for Rishi Sunak, he's very excited. He mentioned that yesterday in his interview as well, that he's extremely excited to be back here in India, his first as Prime Minister. His better half, Akshata Murthy, is also here in India. And of course, the spouses will have a separate program on their own. But Rishi Sunak, there's a lot of meaty issues to be addressed, and Rishi Sunak will also have a separate a standalone bilateral with the Prime Minister on the sidelines of the G20. He did mention yesterday that he's proud to be a Hindu, and of course the India-UK FTA, that's going to be the biggest issue, the biggest box that they need to check, because remember, at the end of the day, this is something that both leaders had vowed to wrap up by Diwali of last year. Unfortunately, they have not been able to do that. So they're clearly hoping that they can give a fillip at the level of the leaders to try and push for the India-UK FTA. Yesterday, he did mention in the interview that it is still some ways off. So whether or not it will get decided in this particular leg, in this particular visit, that he was not particularly sure of. But it's clear that the leaders from both countries are clearly giving their thumbs up. As you can see, both of them shake their hands. You can see that there is a very warm sort of relationship between Rishi Sunak and the Prime Minister. They have met in the past as well on the sidelines of the last G20 in Bali. And of course, now we're getting pictures also of Sergei Lavrov, the Russian foreign minister, who is representing the Russian state, representing President Putin here at the G20. And of course, all eyes will be on Mr. Lavrov and the Russian delegation, because unless they give their consent, unless they agree to the language of the text of the official declaration, you will not have a joint communique. You will not have a New Delhi declaration, as it were. So all eyes on Sergei Lavrov, whether he's been authorized by President Putin, to what degree can he be flexible about the language of the text. Of course, Russia and India are old friends, very, very deep military partners. Even today, despite, how much ever strategic partnership we have with the United States or with other Western countries, more than 50% of India's defense supplies and spare parts even today come from Russia. That might change in the next decade or so, but it's not a country that India can afford to offend, or India can afford to be loose with. As you just see, Mr. Lavrov, I think, was tripping there just a moment ago, and the Prime Minister just reaching out to just hold him back up. The warm shake hand there between Foreign Minister of Russia, Sergei Lavrov, and the Prime Minister. In fact, President Putin had telephoned the Prime Minister last week and conveyed that he will not be in a position to personally come down to India to attend the G20 summit. So the President of Russia is missing in action. But all eyes will be on Sergei Lavrov, the Foreign Minister, and the Russian delegation on how amenable they are to the language of the text. There are some new formulations we're given to understand which are being worked on, which will be, of course, presented to the Russian side and to the Chinese, and whether it is acceptable to them, in terms of being able to eventually agree on a language that is acceptable to all parties involved, so that we can have a joint communique, so that we can have an official New Delhi declaration, which will be the big outcome of the Delhi G20 summit, the first time that India is hosting the G20. So clearly Sergei Lavrov has just come in. So we're basically now just left with the President of the United States, Joe Biden, and usually we are given to understand that this goes in alphabetical order. So awaiting the President of the United States, Joe Biden, who just had his bilateral as well yesterday with the Prime Minister, and quite a few agreements have been announced in that joint statement. One, of course, the possibility of India being some kind of a maintenance and repair hub, if you will, for forward ships of the US Navy. The other critical one was both of them agreeing to resolving all outstanding disputes at the WTO. So these are very significant announcements that have been made. They've also reviewed progress of the agreements that were achieved when the Prime Minister had gone to Washington and to New York back in June, when the state visit happened, whether it is the jet engine deal with GE, whether it is the MQ-9 Reaper drone deal, of course. They have reviewed the progress on both of those deals. So the US will, of course, be the most significant presence in the room today. Again, if we were to find a common language, a common declaration, then the United States has to give its consent. And given the amount of military and non-military aid that the U.S. has given to Ukraine since the start of this war, I believe just a few days ago, the U.S. Congress had put out a document suggesting more than $40 billion have been contributed by the U.S. alone. The European Union and countries in Europe have also contributed somewhere to the tune of 25 to 30 billion. So clearly, the massive amount of money. The Indonesian President Joko Widodo now approaching that red carpet. He's walking down the red carpet. The Indonesians just concluded the East Asia Summit just a couple of days ago, and the Prime Minister had gone there to Jakarta for the ASEAN plus India Summit and also for the East Asia Summit. There again, they were not able to agree on a language of the text for the joint declaration. So has anything changed between the East Asia Summit in Jakarta a couple of days ago and the G20 Summit that Delhi is hosting? Indonesia is, of course, hugely important because it's the previous host. And even in the Bali declaration, negotiators were working round the clock, well into the late hours, burning the midnight oil to try and find a common language for the text that was acceptable to all sides. And Indian mediators played a very, very important role in thrashing out that joint statement. So whether Indonesia will help India find that common language, find that common text for the adoption of the New Delhi Declaration, as the Prime Minister warmly receives Jokowi, as he's fondly called, Jokowi, the leader of Indonesia, the president of Indonesia. Again, Indonesia is a frontline state when it comes to the maritime Silk Route, as it were, or the One Belt, One Road initiative. In fact, the Maritime Silk Route was first announced by Xi Jinping in Indonesia in 2013, right after he became the president of China. And Indonesia has had its own set of problems with China and the way in which it is hegemonically trying to change the status quo here in the Indian Ocean region and in the wider Indo-Pacific, as it were.